Well, thank you for having me here.
It's a true honor. I've been a fan of yours since I was 3 years old, so this is basically a true honor.
Well, the honor's on mine, Justin.
Thank you. And I would like to first start with the history of Bloodsport, which is my favorite movie. Could you tell everybody how Bloodsport and Kumite all started?
Well, that's a lot to tell, but let's start with Bloodsport. It's a rather interesting story. I try to tell people about it that you reap what you sow. And regarding Bloodsport, I had a friend of mine named Sheldon Lettich who graduated the American Film Institute. Sheldon wanted to be a writer, director, and he needed a reel. And so it was recommended to him that he do a short movie. And so he got together with me, and Sheldon wrote it, and I helped finance it, and was even in the movie. It's called Firefight. And actually, believe it or not, it was starring Brian Thompson, who starred in Cobra and had a couple of TV series. He was in it, Gary Casper, a number of people who were just starting out in industry right then and there that nobody even knew about. All of us were young, just starting out our careers. And after we got through wrapping the film and Sheldon was editing it, he came across another gentleman editing his film in the same editing facility, and they got to talking about, martial arts. This guy named Mark DeSalle, who became later the producer of Bloodsport, said, "Hey, wait a minute, that Frank Dux guy, I've been looking for him. I saw this movie, this article on Kumite, or magazine, and I always want to do this movie, a martial art movie." He said, "But right now, the martial art films are dead. Nobody wants to do them because they had run their gamut. It was Sho Kosugi and Chuck Norris, and they had a certain style. But regardless, he thought that was kind of unique. The story was unique enough to get one made. And so, next thing you know, Sheldon arranged a meeting. I met with Sheldon and Mark DeSalle. We had story conferences constantly. I gave Sheldon actual programs of actual Kumite events, had him talk to people. I showed DeSalle actual Kumite footage. And then from that, they said, "Could you do these moves and can you teach them?" I said, "Yeah." And it came out that I was also trained by Hubie Kearns, who's a Stuntman Hall of Fame legend, along with Boyd Red Morgan, who both trained me. And what people don't know is that Hubie is the one who trained Bruce Lee, movie fighting.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he did it for the Green Hornet, doing Kato. Showed him how to stage it and do the camera work. Although Lee had lots of experience doing some films in China, it was still the art. There's an art to setting it up, and that came from Hubie, who also schooled me.
Wow.
God rest his soul. And when we went in to do the film, there was actually two of us to do the choreography. There was a guy named Steve Lee, who was a Chinese fight coordinator, and he's on the film as the stunt coordinator. And then there was myself. And Lee would do his kind of chop socky kind of things. I said, why do it that way? Let's do it the real way. Let's do it the way it really happened.
Right. So
I started staging, and I was asked to work with all the fighters, and I did, and I choreographed the movie. And of course, I worked with David Worth, who is a brilliant mind as far as movie making goes. And we came up with a whole new way of shooting it, a whole different way to sequence it, a whole different way of cutting it. And we actually changed the way the genre was done. And that's primarily, I think, one of the reasons why Bloodsport was such a success, because when you looked at the movie, it looked different. It had a different feel about it. The fight scenes built to a certain crescendo, and of course the story itself said a lot, and I had a lot of fans all over the world who knew about my fight record to begin with, so we had a built-in audience in many ways for people to want to go see it.
And you tried to keep it as realistic as possible.
I did. In fact, Showtime did a special where they actually showed footage in Showtime against scenes in the movie, and you could see they were similar. The kicks, they weren't as graceful. Obviously, when you're doing a movie, you got a little more time. You can make your kick look really pretty and beautiful, and a straight leg where it might be just a little bit bent in a real fight because of distancing. You know, you're not
Yeah.
getting cooperation of the guy. But and also when you kick a guy in movies, it really goes by his head. You don't really kick him a lot of times. It actually is like a foot away. Whereas if you're hitting a guy in real life, you know, your foot's going to stop because it's making a contact.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little difference in that regard, but other than that, the movements were identical, and that's one of the reasons why everybody enjoyed it. Ted Tabora, one of the things, best compliments I ever got was from, they call him the Sickle Man. Ted Tabora is one of the greatest martial artists that ever lived. He's a martial art legend. And
Wow.
he loved it. He said it was very real, and that's one of the things he loved about it. And he knew about Kumite fights from his days as being a young man.
Wow. Now, how did the name Bloodsport come about? I've heard this story before, but for people that have not heard this story, I would like them to hear the story about how the title Bloodsport came about.
Well, a lot of people thought the term Bloodsport comes from fox hunting because they used to call that. I never even knew it at the time. What happened was when I was fighting my first fight was in Tijuana, Mexico, on a junkyard. And they had made the platform out of old tires and 2x4s and plywood all nailed together.
Mm-hmm.
And they stretched over it some styrofoam and then put a cloth over that. I mean, that was my platform.
That was your mat.
That was my mat. And so there were supposed to be 6 fighters. There was only 5 of us. So they're out trying to get the 6th fighter because I guess the 6th guy kind of chickened out. And while we're waiting around, I was really nervous. I'm 19 years old at the time. I didn't know what to think. So I did like a Howard Cosell imitation. I walked up to the other fighters to break the ice and said, you know, here we are at the Red Cross Bloodsport, where everybody's guaranteed to give a pint.
All right, moving on real quick. I read your book, The Secret Man.
Yeah.
I love it. I want to hear a little bit about that, but I understand that you didn't get to fully write the book. How do you feel about the success, and what would you have done different if you could have finished the book?
First of all, The Secret Man, I started writing it, and I took ill. I was actually hospitalized and put in a coma at the time. And one of the things about it that really got to me is that I lost my voice in it. Like they did certain things that in the editing that didn't make sense. Like they put down Admiral Smith was a Gulf War commander. No, I was saying he was a rank of a commander at the time. There was the Gulf War. Different things like that. They didn't adhere to my galley changes. One of the things is they say Casey was short. I said he was short of breath. That he used to mumble a lot. They took that line out, and of course they left short, but fortunately for my vindication, later in the book I talk about how I was tall and lanky and moving in a certain way.
Wow.
And so I got a little bit disturbed with it, and I eventually saw this resistance come out on the book, and I got a phone call from someone basically saying you need to stop promoting it because there's certain people it's putting in jeopardy. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And I did, and you know.
I love the book, but I wanted to make a statement. I know that you've had, you know, controversy in your life.
Mm-hmm.
People writing this and writing that about your life, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they chip away at Frank and all this. I've read the due diligence. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, Albert Einstein said it himself. You know, great minds have, you know, are bound to face, you know, violent opposition by mediocre minds. And you know, I'm a threat to a lot of people in the industry, a perceived threat. I don't know why they see that, but that's exactly how they do it. They can't compete with me from a academic level, physical level, or experiences. So the only thing they can do is by creating controversy or fueling controversy. It's a good example was a guy who's a reporter who wanted to make a name for himself. Said I bought my Kumite trophy, but
yeah, and it was the receipt was wrong, correct?
Well, it was ridiculous. I mean, it
Yeah.
showed that the man was a liar. It was so grossly